Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of AngularAir. I'm your host, Justin Schwarzenberger, and we're up and at it a little bit early this morning. We got an early start on our episode, so you get to see it early. That's all I got. uh, Today, we're going to be talking about the history and future of Angular, kind of dive into the past and see what might be coming up and get a fresh take on that. Joining us as panelists today, we have Austin McDaniel. Austin, what's going on?
How's it going, everyone? Sorry, I don't have my panda head. I've been traveling, so I forgot it.
That thing doesn't go with you? I would think that that'd
Well,
be like the first thing you pack.
you kind of have to prioritize space in your luggage, and the panda head just isn't at the top of that list.
You need like a paper panda mask that can be temporary for when you're on the road or something. It's easy, flat, easy to pack. I don't know.
There we go.
Cool. We got Mike Brocky with us as well. Mike, what's going on?
Not too much. You guys just tell me it's early, but it's 11 o'clock here. I'm all set, ready to roll.
I guess it's really only early for two of us. And it's not really that early. I mean, but yep. And our guest today, Brad Green. Brad, how's it going?
It's not that early. I agree. It's okay. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Yeah, trying to make it a little dramatic, but yeah, whatever. So, all right, Brad, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself for viewers that might not be familiar with who you are? Yeah, give us a little story about what do you do and how long have you been doing it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an engineering director at Google. I manage a bunch of eng teams. One of them is the Angular team, and Angular is the team that I've had with me for the longest. So we started this in kind of late 2009, and here we are today. Maybe a little surprised we're still a team together.
Yeah, that's a long time, especially in the front end space, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
Cool. All right, so before we start talking about this whole Angular story and everything that's going on, I do have a question for you. So way back in the very first episode of AngularAir, I think it was number 0. We started with a 0 index. You guys were on, and you were on, and you had this sweet mustache. Like, is that thing ever going to come back?
Maybe. My daughter, who's 5, asked me that. She's like, "Daddy, do you ever grow?" She didn't say mustache, but something like that. I was like, well, that was for this Movember thing, and I looked like someone who might abduct other children with a panel van, and because I just, if you're going to go Movember, like, why not be dramatic? And so I had the full 1970s handlebar thing going on.
I gotta say it was pretty sweet, but I mean that's exactly right? Your kids and your family, like, they kind of drive those decisions at that point when you have that. Like, should I have it? Not, I got the little beard coming back because my girls kind of wanted it, and it's like, okay, whatever you guys want, let's do it.
Totally. I'm not my own keeper anymore. So yeah, maybe this November, if it's we'll see after this episode what people think. If we get a lot of votes. Sure.
There we go.
I'm going to start a Twitter poll.
Yeah.
Perfect.
On your Twitter feed, you used to say that you had chickens. Do you still have chickens?
I think it still says that. Yeah, I have chickens. They're not the same chickens, all of them, but they're still there.
And you live in San Francisco area. How does that work?
No,
out?
Mountain View, but you could have chickens in San Francisco. They're easier than cats. Come on.
They might stink a little bit more.
Throw down kibble. Do you have a cat box?
Yeah.
I don't. I have a dog.
Chickens live outside. It's a good deal.
All right, so here's the question. Turnover. More turnover with the chickens or more turnover with the Angular team?
Chickens, I'm afraid. We've had a skunks problem recently, and it's been hard on my flock. Skunks don't bother the team as much, but they are disturbed by skunks. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't suggest trying that one though, just to get a feeler or not.
We have had some turnover. Like, some of my favorite people have come and gone through the Angular team. It's a long-lived team, and the fact that it's still Mishko, Igor, and myself running the thing it's surprising. It's good. We still have a good time together.
All right, well that's a good point to start going back in time a bit. A little right? Let's go back to the very, very beginning. Because I don't know how many people actually kind of know the story of why did Angular come about? Like, what was it for, and what was the purpose? When was it created, and that sort of thing? Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, so nobody here at Google ever said we're going to build a web framework to help everybody. And these are things we came to over time a little bit. So Mishko had some ideas where he wanted to do something else. He wanted to really help non-technical people put websites together. And he had an angle on it where you were kind of doing pseudo programming if you knew HTML, and it turned out that route just kind of had a lot of headroom issues. But what he built was kind of good, and we actually found he was on a different project that I was running, and we were pretty frustrated with our development speed, and he kind of made this boast, hey, I will rewrite this horrible thing we've been spending 6 months on in 2 weeks. Just give me 2 weeks to do it. And it kind of took him 3 weeks. And so, I could have fired him at that point, but no, that doesn't happen that way. It was pretty impressive how far he was able to get with this sort of nascent AngularJS bit that he put together. And so, being able to have these declarative templates, and we had, code attached, and it was just seemed like a nice way to work. And so, little by little, we found a way to grow that team. Igor Minar was the hire, and Igor and Mishko have been a really good pair for each other. Like Igor, really solid engineering underpinnings and like really good eye for the community, and Mishko with, game changers for sure. They keep each other honest.
Now,
Yeah.
when you were first developing that, like you were developing it for internal, at what point was it like, did you decide early on, or was it kind of like, how did you decide that you're going to kind of make this open source and available to everyone?
So it actually always started open source. Mishko, I think he lost his reason why originally he was shooting for this open source audience, realized that the original plan wasn't going to work out, and he's like, okay, well maybe internal folks can use it, but it was open source at the time, and so we're like, well, let's just keep developing it that way. It's it's a different way to do things. There's pluses and minuses versus developing inside Google, and we've just always kept it.
Yeah, one of the things on the whole thing you're talking about in terms of where it was born and what was for, right? I like the concept of understanding what that is, because you kind of see those overall initial goals still in the platform today, right? When you talk about like the template syntax, right? And this concept that you're trying to apply JavaScript logic to markup so that people could get in there and add some logic and functionality in the markup that they're already used to, right? And that kind of resonates throughout the whole history of Angular. That's why we had the template syntax, and kind of that's where it came from. And I think of it in terms of like, well, you have something like JSX or writing markup in JavaScript. Like why does Angular not take that approach, right? And I think it's neat that it doesn't, because of the history of it.
A little bit. I mean, I think like they're both valid perspectives, and there's various frameworks that follow one or the other sort of camps. Like one of the things that I like about the template syntax in HTML is that I can have separate people work on them who might have different skill sets. Like it's a nice thing if I've got if I have a big team where I've got specialists. I've got UX folks who can certainly work on the templates, but might not understand the code. I've got folks in test roles. I've got maybe product managers who can, we can discuss the way things are laid out. Just also in a probably opinion based, but like you could view this as separation of concerns, where my rendering is taken care of by the templates, and the logic and functionalities done in the code. So yeah, definitely some nice properties that we get from it.
So this,
Yeah,
go ahead.
It's been extrapolated out even more so with Angular versus AngularJS. Is not only is the template separate, but the template does not necessarily need to be HTML. You could have other renders destined for other platforms as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that separation of renderers was, I think, is really helpful for us. For making other syntaxes available. And we kind of did this, like we kind of supported we do support SVG in AngularJS. It was actually like, because of the new architecture, it was much easier to support SVG or new template syntaxes in the future.
So this open source story that you guys started with from the very beginning, the team started with, what challenges have you had at going that route? Like deciding, as this thing plays out and builds and you need to use this internally for teams and stuff like that. Did you run into anything going, oh man, we back ourselves into a corner, or maybe this is a little harder to do it this way? Or has it always been not a problem to say, look, we're keeping this open source, it's just moving forward and everything just fits?
No, it's probably easy to be all open source or all internal, but having both is actually really hard. And I think if this wasn't such a passion project for a lot of the folks that work on it, folks wouldn't survive it. We've kind of at Google, we're on the bleeding edge of the way folks do this internal external. Certainly, the biggest project that does this, I think, where we've actually built a lot of internal toolings, but we're starting to see more and more projects do it this way. The TensorFlow project does the the externalization of their code, and so we're starting to get some help from other teams that build systems to help us bring in the truth from GitHub and then rebuild it in Google and roll it out to all the internal folks. There's just the difference in the way that we do the build systems that's hard to match, and so one of the things that we're doing that will help us in the future is for the Angular project, we're building functionality so we can use the internal Google build system, which internally is called Blaze, but externally is called Bazel, B-A-Z-E-L, which is anagram of Blaze. And so it's our hope that we can actually mirror our build systems to make it a lot easier for us to work inside and outside. And so for one thing we need to do is when we're rolling out code to the rest of Google, we need to make sure that it works, and we're actually responsible for upgrading everybody's code at Google. And so we need to build the software internally and externally. It'd be nice if we could have the same tests run, and for that we need the same build system to run. And so we're excited about the future.
So is Bazel going to be replacing Webpack?
Well, not anytime soon for sure. So we've also have some other large enterprises that want Bazel for its capabilities in scale and reliability. There's just a lot of things that Webpack does that we don't, of course we have analogs for them inside Google, but then we would have to open source all of those analogs. But there are some big teams that it seems very attractive to them, and we're helping some of them get going with Bazel. We don't have what I would call a viable solution where, oh yes, you should go pick up Bazel, it's got great scale and you'll be happy. Maybe someday. But we'll probably have some more demos in the fall so you can see the current state of everything.
So on that open source topic, there is a lot of talk here around React and their licenses. What do you do you see Angular like having any type of that? Like what are your thoughts on that?
So I mean, our goal with Angular has always been to make it the least restrictive thing possible. I mean, you notice this from our MIT license to our Creative Commons logos. Like, go crazy, do what you want. I mean, and like bad things can happen, and we've had some times where people have been sort of doing things that were confusing to the community with our logo, with our name, and generally it's been fine. We've just kind of had a conversation with those folks. We said, oh, hey, maybe you didn't know, but this is what's going on, and it's been fine. So if we can continue doing things that way, that's awesome. I think, like, in general, most people are reasonable, helpful, want to be a great community.
That's awesome, and that's really exciting to hear too, as a big Angular fan, that you guys are continuing to embrace that.
Kudos to our legal department. They've been really easy to work with, and like once we describe our goals, they've been like, okay, that all makes sense. And so Yeah.
I'm going to nitpick on one thing that you said, or at least pick up on one thing you said. You said that TensorFlow externalizes their code. Whereas with the Angular project, you work externally and then bring it internal. Is that correct, or is TensorFlow working publicly and then pulling it internal?
I actually don't know how TensorFlow works. I know that they've got a big external footprint, and I know they use some of the same tools that we use, but I don't know their exact workflow.
Okay, I was just curious if that was going to be the continued focus of the Angular team to do things publicly and then internalize with that continued workflow.
Yeah, that's the plan, and we're just gonna try and make more of the way we do things externally look like the way we do things internally, so there's less friction bringing stuff in.
So I think one of the license things that's coming up and these concerns and stuff, a lot of it centers around enterprise, right? And these enterprise companies deciding, should I take on this code base and use it? Are we going to be in a tight spot or whatnot, right? And I think Angular has kind of really found a fit in that enterprise scenario. A lot of enterprise companies like the fact that it's there. So I kind of want to talk about, it kind of originated as a framework, and now it's really become a platform. Like, how did it become a platform, and what was the decision to decide that to bring it all, to have all these working pieces as part of Angular platform rather than just like a JavaScript framework?
I think, we kind of overreached in our first AngularJS release, where we did a lot more than we knew how. We had a router, but wasn't all that good, and we had REST persistence, and it wasn't all that good. And so we've always kind of had this ambition to be really inclusive of the entire development cycle. And again, that kind of goes back to why we use the declarative template syntax. Is like, well, when you think about it, it's more than just a single developer. There's a big team out here. Well, and then it's a slippery slope, right? Okay, well, now we need a unit test runner and a end-to-end test facility and accessibility and animation and all of these great things. And so to the ability we've had to fund them, we've really tried to make developers' lives easier. And that's why people come to Angular to work on it. And that's, I think, why the community's here, is like we all want it to be an inclusive solution that pretty much does what I need out of the box without me having to figure out, well, which pieces do I have to put together and configure. I think we're not perfect. I think there's still a bunch we can do to make things better and easier and more integrated and aligned, but I'm pretty happy with where we ended up.
That's one thing, when I talk to people and talk to them about Angular, it's like all these different tools to build a simple, cute website. You don't need all those tools. But if you're building serious applications like you guys do at Google internally and many organizations do, you need all these tools together and working cohesively. And that platform that Angular provides is, I think, the biggest seller for me in terms of just, ramping people up, getting the team on the same page, and getting all the tools to work together. So I think that's a huge, huge benefit.
Yeah, I think, on that point, we've I think we could do a better job showing people how to use Angular in simpler situations also. I think AngularJS had this really nice property where I could drop the script tag on a page and get going. And in Angular, it's like, well, it's not super obvious. Like, how do I achieve that? I just put a little bit on a page. It's something I'd like us to sort of refocus on a little bit in the future. I think part of it's docs, part of it's maybe some simpler ways to get going.
Well, I mean, the types of development, our flows of development have radically changed from 2009. Back then we had TypeScript actually did exist back then, but it wasn't highly adopted. And we had these tools, but they weren't really mainstream. I think around then, like Gulp or Grunt was just barely getting started. So a lot of these tools were not being used mainstream, and our development life cycles today are drastically different. And so I think that's going to be really challenging to kind of get that back down to that level, just given like compilers and packaging and all that type of stuff. But I'll be excited to see how it goes.
Yeah, me too. I don't know. Have you seen StackBlitz?
Is that the online editor?
That's the online editor where, like,
oh yes, yeah.
I just drop in and I'm coding, both Angular and React, and there's nothing to do. Seems like a little bit of investment in tools like those. I think we could have a pretty nice time.
Yeah, another nice thing about that is that you can add other libraries and it does all the plumbing stuff for you.
Right.
So
yeah, that's the magical
thing
thing.
To do that, right?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. All right, Brad, I got a question for you. Another question. We got questions all day, right? So a couple of years ago, back at AngularU, I got a chance to sit with you and a handful of other people, and we talked about this notion of how can we start championing the web again and making the web important again, right? Get away, and not get away, but say, look, there's all this focus on installable apps, right? Especially in the mobile space and things like that. And how can we bring the web back as this top player? I kind of want to get your take. I've been waiting for a while now and excited about this to find out, like, what do you feel? Like, how do you feel we're at that? How we started to make progress on that? And we've got things like a lot of focus on PWAs, and it seems like a lot of chatter and focus in just the industry as general about the web being important again. Do you feel good about that? And like, how are we coming on that?
So it looks like, I think Safari is going to be supporting service workers, like finally getting some code to support it, which was kind of the last thing that would allow, if I'm looking at, can I deploy progressive web apps as a mobile strategy? Like that was kind of the last thing that I need to be, certain this is going to work out. At the same time, I think my impression is that, we are investing heavily in progressive web apps, and we have a version in Angular support doing progressive web apps already, and we're working on making it even easier, more functional, and making the development experience really, really, really tight. But I haven't seen a lot of uptake. There are some kind of early adopters who are taking the strategy, but my guess is that it's not on most folks' radar yet. If I'm running a development shop in enterprise or consumer, I think it hasn't hit me. Like, there's maybe a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Like, we don't see user behavior following this, and therefore we don't see development companies adopting it. But I'd love to hear from everybody here. What are you seeing out there?
I see, I've seen a lot of interest, like with the Twitter client, right, that came out, the web-based Twitter client, and a lot of people talking, hey, I've uninstalled the Twitter app. I'm rolling with the web-based Twitter client and Instagram and stuff like that. So I think there's some movement on those sort of fronts.
I think for a lot of organizations, the App Store is almost like a marketing platform as well. Having it up at the top, like, that's a platform to get people to see your application where they might not, browse through your, website and see that. So I think that has some play.
So okay, so I don't really know what I'm talking about, but my impression is that so the numbers I've seen is like most apps in the App Store or the Play Store don't get installed. Some crazy percentage in the 90s. Like, never gets installed, not even once. And so, but those folks who never get installed once still can get traction via search. Where people might not know about your topic or your site or find your app, they might come across you in search because, like, through SEO and through normal web search facilities, you can get people to come and find your PWA, and if they like it, they can install it. So strategically, I think the way it may play out is that if you're in the top tier, you're a big, well-known brand, people will want to go find you in the App Store or the Play Store. And if you're not, like if you're the rest of the 90-something of us, maybe PWAs is really the right answer. And even if you are in the top percentile, people are going to surf and find you. So maybe you kind of need both.
But even if it's not about mobile, the benefits that you get from writing your app the way that PWAs specify through that specification is going to be advantageous for desktop users as well. They're going to have a more performant application for use, especially on a laptop, desktop, tablet versus just on a phone.
Absolutely. And so like we've been running our doc site this way, angular.io, you can see it in action. And it has a great reload behavior for the desktop, and it makes it super fast and smooth. I think like there's some other Angular sites popping up that have this behavior as well. Like shopstyle.com, I think, does a service worker, and they get some good reload behavior out of that. So yeah, it's starting to happen. And yeah, the desktop, it's kind of like a no-lose situation. The hard thing a little bit is that as the developer, you don't expect the behavior you're getting, because it's like there's another layer of cache that that you're not quite aware of. Like where we've seen people, continue to reload their app on a PWA, thinking, why is it not refreshing? It's like, well, it's cached. They'll do, go to the lengths of, I uninstalled my whole app, like redid npm, and yet still it persists. I'm going to reformat my hard drive. So anyway, that's one of the things we've been investing in a developer's tool, so that there's ways you can do cache busting on PWAs, and that you have ways in the development lifecycle to make sure the refresh happens with expected.
One of the things that I find as a developer and being in the web space that's interesting about all this stuff is like, because it moves so fast, like you almost get lost in some of this stuff, and you find yourself, for example, like the service worker one is a great example, right? It's like, oh man, I need that, I got that, but I don't fully kind of grasp what's going on yet because it's just moving so fast. But even things like we talk about Angular, and it's like, okay, this feels great to be building my web stuff in Angular, right? But I'm building a single page application, and now all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm ready to build my content site. Let's go do it, right? I'm going to use Angular. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, it's a single page app, and some of the things I'm used to, I've been developing like a content site before, now I have to kind of rethink, and is it, anybody else find that kind of hits, and now you're so going fast and forward that some of these things get confusing?
I think so. But I think with anything that, and to the idea of service worker being confusing, that as new technology comes out, what really makes that more approachable and more usable and more understandable is tooling assistance. And as the tooling gets better and you don't have to go 3, 4, 10 layers deep to figure out how to use something, and it's just there at the surface and things are handled for you. I mean, not that you shouldn't understand what's going on, but as tooling gets better, I think that adoption will get better. As for the idea of doing a content site with or without Angular, I think that's more dependent upon choosing the right tool for the right job. So maybe if you're just doing static content, maybe Angular doesn't make sense. But if you want to pull in things like animation and you want to do that, and you don't want to have to go out and learn a different animation tool set using like CSS transitions, when you've already invested in learning Angular animations, then maybe that does make the most sense for you. But
yeah, I think that's the hard part, right? Because you get excited about some of the stuff. You get like this scope styling components and this isolation of things and all this awesomeness that you get with Angular, right? And you're like, I just want to keep living in that. I really don't want to go back and build a PHP site or whatnot, right? So it's like, I don't know, the challenge. Which I think is a good testament to what Angular is, right? Because it's built this excitement that people love to live in it.
So I'm not an expert. I think it would be a great show for you folks to bring on some of the for building content sites with Angular, who picked it, and like Forbes.com, ShopStyle I mentioned, Weather Underground. Like if you could get a group of these folks together, I think it'd be a great show.
That is a great idea. We need to make that happen.
I'll connect with you, Brad, maybe you got some contacts that we can talk to.
Yeah, I think we could find some folks.
So, kind of a question I want to bring up: Angular 2. That was a long road to Angular 2. So the name AngularJS versus Angular, how did that come about? Like, it still to this day it feels a little confusing.
I agree. I don't know what the right answer was. We may not still have had the right answer. It still feels like a little weird to folks. So obviously we could have done a better job. I don't like, we could have kept AngularJS and just increment the version number, but it was such a big jump. We wanted to kind of be honest with folks about, well, this is actually something very different. And so how to express that, right? And so maybe we got it kind of wrong, and it is confusing. But at the same time, similarities between AngularJS and Angular, template syntax and dependency injection and services and all of these things are very similar. If you've used our HTTP, like we have, like, I think a way better version in Angular now, but like all of the main concepts are transferable. But at the same time, like my code is going to be different. Like the template syntax is different. It's updated. It's cleaner, but it's different. You have to learn something new.
What do you, you know, that was a long road, and it's such a huge jump. Do you see people, you know, moving to Angular and getting excited about that, or are people happy with AngularJS?
We see both, for sure. You know, we built Angular so that it could, you know, scale to bigger teams, have a clearer template syntax so that we could do static analysis and build tooling to help like do a lot of the refactoring and move from one version to another, just automate things, and then you know, just help people at scale much better so that it could be higher performance and work with greater numbers of developers. Some folks don't need that. They're like, no, I have a small site and I love AngularJS, or like we actually built an app and I've got a big team and we figured out ways to work around things in AngularJS and we're perfectly happy, which is awesome. I mean, that's a big testament that people are still happy with something that kind of architecturally we designed in 2009, 2010.
Yeah, that's nuts. Something developed in 2009 is still used and loved. Is just crazy. You know, that was such a big jump. Are you guys, you know, planning to make any huge releases like that anytime in the future again? Or, you know, can we, you know, is Angular, you know, the way that we see it today, going to just continue to incrementally improve like that, or is there big jumps planned ahead?
Yeah, we don't have any big jumps planned, and I think like we really want to be able to, you know, bring the community along. Like you know, it's a tax, and it is, you know, we don't actually get everybody to come along. We actually, you know, we picked up some new folks who, you know, wouldn't have looked at AngularJS because it didn't scale the way they wanted or didn't have the syntax they liked. But we do want everyone to come along, and so yeah, we're intentionally going to stick to incremental as much as we can.
That's awesome. Every release that I've upgraded, like I don't think I've had, you know, but one or two issues, and I always stay on latest, and the issues are fixed within a day. So it's great testament for that developer experience to be able to stay on latest and not have, you know, frequent breaking changes and have elegant deprecation and things like that. Kind of back to that point on AngularJS and people still using it today and happy with it. What's the support plan for that look like? Are you guys going to continue to support it? And, you know, what's the plan there?
For the foreseeable future, you know, what the thing we've said publicly is, until the majority of folks are on Angular, we're going to keep supporting AngularJS. And that's still the plan. So if you're on, you know, AngularJS, we're going to continue to do releases, although there seems to be less and less to do on AngularJS. We've, you know, kind of run out of runway and you know, big things that we want to do there. So you know, if you want to be on a platform that's pretty static but very stable, Angular is fine. And if we never change it, it's still fine, because there's people who, you know, for many years have been happy with it, and that's great. But for moving into the future with, you know, more capabilities, like we have, you know, animation facility in Angular, HTTP gets much easier to test. We, you know, doing things like PWAs and server-side rendering. Those are things you would come to Angular for.
All right, let's talk about that future.
Real quick, because I want to there was a question asked online. So Austin, you brought up the idea of staying up with latest. The question was for you, Brad, of how up to date does Google stay with Angular internally? Are you using the latest release, RC, beta? What versions are you using internally?
So internally, it's on ahead, like it's really ahead of everybody else. So we end up testing the stuff that gets exported against you know, thousands and thousands of Angular files internally at Google before it ever gets out to the public. It doesn't find everything, of course, because we do development differently inside Google, but I mean, it's a great first step in verification.
And just to clarify, when you say head, that's the latest of the master branch within the master branch. That's right. Mm-hmm. Sorry to cut you off, Justin. Go ahead.
Nope, that's totally fine. Get that info out there. All right, so future. So do you have anything, major advancements that you guys are kind of looking at, or the team's looking at in terms of, oh man, like the animations was one that's just recent, right?
Yeah.
Anything else that you're kind of planning that might be pretty cool for the future of Angular? I mean, we talked about the build system, right? You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, Bazel supporting that. And again, that's for folks, again, this is kind of continuing on the path for folks who need more and more scale, where they might have hundreds of developers, many teams who build sort of apps made of smaller apps that we need to integrate and bring together. You know, how do we scale past the limits of memory on a single machine? Like this is where things like Bazel and the Clojure compiler code optimizer are very helpful, and you know, we want to make things inside Google more available to folks on the outside. And we'll continue with that. There's you know, the big focus. There's a bunch of things we're working on towards version 5. We talked about progressive web apps, making that easier and more attractive, and you know, within the CLI, we'd like to, like Mike said, move towards that being the default way that people develop, because there's so many benefits, both desktop and mobile. And we actually want to prove it out, and so we actually don't build that many big apps ourselves. We have some dashboards. We have Angular.io, and you know, we got some team goals to continue to make that smaller and faster. And so if you're looking for a place like where are we going to show off a lot of our best practices, it's going to be in Angular.io.
Cool.
Is that project open source?
It is open source, absolutely. Just part of the Angular repo there.
Awesome.
Which is a great spot to go look and learn from, right? See those things being implemented and kind of peruse that source code.
Absolutely. So yeah, so we, you know, Igor and Pete and a bunch of folks are working on some advanced code splitting, and you know, the way we do packaging, and you know, all the things we can do to make that small.
So it sounds like the future is all about tooling. No big platform features. You know, are you going to do you know, a native, you know, platform or a VR platform or anything like that, like, you know, React is doing? Or is there anything like that on the agenda?
Oh, that's a good question. I wouldn't rule those things out. I mean, those are all architectural capabilities for Angular. For native, we actually, like, you know, we have some solutions in the Angular space with Ionic and NativeScript. But I mean, maybe a question for you folks, like, what do you want to see from us in terms of, like, Austin, I know you want us to do VR, so way to sneak that in. Good job. But like, I don't know. What do you feel like the community wants?
I don't feel like the community's probably to VR yet, except for, you know, a couple people. Although I did go to CNN's website yesterday and notice that they have a WebVR link across the top. So I think it's getting there. But I mean, that's one thing that I would like to see, kind of WebGL abstraction for Angular components. And, you know, I've talked about this quite a bit in the past, so.
Like for that kind of thing, it seems like not quite core to what the Angular team wants to do. And maybe the thing I would like to have happen is that it would be easy enough to work with Angular so that somebody else could build that on top of compiler. Maybe that would be a nice thing for us. Like maybe having a more stable API on the compiler where it's easier to build your own abstraction, your own template syntax, your own whatever you wanted would be a nice thing for us to work on.
So I think maybe some other stuff like some prescribed way of doing like authentication, right? Or maybe bringing in ngRx into the mix, or something that, or is there these like pluggable but official things that could come out of the Angular team that says, here's these prescribed ways to do things, or something like that?
Yeah. You know, like one of the things where we can help people more is like just really taking it to heart that any decision you have to make on the platform is an expensive one. And it's hard to know, like any team to know, did I make the right decision? Like even after I made it, it's still kind of this mental task, like, oh, I should still be considering something else. And our theme, like this is why we have animations and I18N and all of these facilities in the Angular repo that we build. But then, yeah, like how much more could we do to like, hey, well, look, there's a best practice for pretty much everything you're going to do. I think one of them we could do a better job in helping people understand that we're recommending this is the sort of OnPush model for components, where like, you know, if you use a data store solution like ngRx, it can be really easy to implement where like the structure of your data model itself tells the components when to update. Much higher performance, like there's some nice like debugging because you've got the single direction data flow there. And then, you know, baking that more into the docs and just, and pretty much everything we do, the CLI, had the default.
So is OnPush gonna become the default soon?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought of what we need to do to make that default. I think, you know, as far as defaults go, we are trying to make it so that AOT, you know, we have these two modes. We've got the JIT mode and AOT mode. And AOT is just higher performance. And JIT is nice because it's dynamic, but like we have all these performance problems. Well, not problems, it's still faster than AngularJS, but not as fast as AOT. And so we've been doing, as we go towards 5, is, you know, eliminating all the needs that, or all the things that JIT could do that AOT couldn't, and having answers for all these things. And so we feel like we're kind of at the point where we're going to have answers for that I can have a fast turnaround in the compile cycle for getting my AOT work done. So I can always be seeing the AOT version of my app in my browser as I develop it. And just, you know, as much as we can, like doing all the things that a developer needs in AOT, and not so they don't even need JIT anymore. So yeah, I think that's another place that we want our developers to get to.
I have one big request, and that's get rid of Zone.js.
Okay, well, and you know, I think if you're using ngRx, that's a possibility that you could do Angular without Zone.js.
And to your point, Austin, about the idea of making OnPush the default, if you're using the CLI, you can do that with when you generate in the configuration, just turn OnPush to, or change detection to be OnPush for all new components.
What's that flag look like, Mike? You just you set it somewhere that my default is this?
Yeah, so under defaults, there's a section for a component, and under there you can just set change detection and set it to OnPush, and then whenever you generate a new component, it'll be OnPush.
Yeah, this is nice. And like, if I have a team and I want to set some defaults like this is a place we can go.
So yeah, one of the big challenges I think with Angular is the fact that there's so many ways to do things, and you do things in one way and it works, and you change it up and do it another way and that works too. And so how do you know which one it is? And then how do you get yourself prepared for, as I add more features, that means I should have architected it the other way instead of the way I did, so I can support the new thing that I'm adding to my application or something. And so it's like you have all this power because we have this platform that gives you all of these things, right? But then you almost need this guidance or this knowledge of, okay, how do I use it in the right way? But to that, like, as we move forward, and we know everything changes so fast in this industry, right? Like, how do you ensure that Angular stays relevant and stays valuable as we go forward into the future? And I think part of that could be this fact that you can do all these things in all these ways. So now you've built this platform that allows us to grow and change as we need. But how do you see that going forward?
Yeah, I think we were kind of talking about this. Like, it's not really about reducing choice, but providing a default that we've seen work across hundreds or thousands of projects, so that and through documentation and through the CLI, the way we just set code up at the beginning, folks, the natural easiest path is that everything is kind of done the same way. And but maybe at the same time having an escape hatch of this alternate route of doing things, so that if like you have a special circumstance that thousands of apps we've seen didn't anticipate, there's a way for you to get these things done. That's like, I think my hope is that we can find those defaults so that maybe you never have to look at those choices.
Cool. So let's talk really quick about the this community that everybody's kind of built around Angular, and this message that the team delivered a long time ago, this just inclusiveness and goodwill and positivity, that we have this strong community around Angular, right? Like, how do you maintain that culture going forward? And has that been challenging with the growth of Angular and the more people you get coming in, and how do you control that culture?
Totally challenging. And I think like none of us were experts in marketing or PR or communities or how to be socially aware. And I feel like, when we had like our first conference, ngConf, it felt small. It felt like you could know everybody in the community. And then it kind of exploded overnight after that, where, it's worldwide, and there's hundreds of meetups that happen every month, and pretty much every major city has one. And everyone wanted us to come talk at their meetup or their conference, and there was no way for us to scale to this level. But kind of at the same time, this is why we do Angular. Like, we want that contact, and we want, and then plus we have the hundreds of teams inside Google using Angular who also want the same thing from us. And it has been a challenge, and like, we're not going to get it right all the time, but we are working on more and more ways that we can have contact with folks. I think like AngularAir and other shows like it are great ways that we can answer questions and be available. We still do our meetups here in Mountain View, which was maybe a little silly considering the scale. We do like to get out and chat with folks as often as we can. That's what makes it worthwhile for us.
I think from another side looking in, right, I think there's two things that really are big that happen. And one is the setup of that community and that culture became a draw to pull people in. I mean, like, for me, when I saw it, and I'm like, that's where I want to be, right? I want to be in this positive zone. I want to be in this, inclusive zone of being excited and being positive about this front end development and whatever it is. In this case, it's Angular, but it's also learning from other places and stuff like that. And it's like, cool, there's other people that share that. So that pulled me in, and I think it pulls in a lot of other people into our community that are of that mindset, right? So it brings people in. But then I think it also makes people comfortable to be that way too. I think there's a lot of people that want to be positive and that want to be influential and help other people. And maybe they feel that it's not, not cool or not something that they want to be a part of, but they see other people in this community saying it's okay. We embrace that. And now all of a sudden they can feel that release and say, I'm going to act that same way. I'm going to do that same sort of thing. I'm going to tweet positivity. I'm going to do these, good things. And so I think it draws that out, and now it's just building momentum. And I like that. I think it's pretty cool.
That's what I want to see. At the same time, I noticed on this conference, it's a bunch of white guys talking about inclusivity. And so at some level, yeah, like we feel it. It seems good, but maybe we failed in some other ways. I know this is a maybe unrepresentative sample of the Angular community. And like, there are good things going on. I'd love to support more of them. Like, NG Atlanta has predominantly women speakers coming to talk there. There's NG girls, and there's other communities. But I would love to see more of that, where it's not a bunch of us white good old boys feeling like we're fully inclusive.
Sadly, our 2 women panelists could not make it today.
Yeah, exactly. So this is not a representative sample, but we can always do better.
But I think we're doing important things. I mean, I think we're making it, that we're striving to make it that way, right? I mean, the things that we can do, we can say, look, let's make this a positive zone. Let's make this a helpful zone, and like you said, with conferences with the NG Atlanta, it's great conferences being set up to try and pull more in and get more visibility. I think that's the other part of the story, right? Make more visibility that we all do exist here, and we're all doing these awesome things, and how can we promote that and stuff.
We all change based on the community we're part of, and we want to be part of this community. And the fact that we've stated, hey, this is explicitly our goal in the community, is to build welcoming, inclusive place where, like, we want to draw people in of all different perspectives and ways they place they come from and ways they view life. And we will not get it right every time, but we'll get better over time as a group, and I think that feels pretty good.
Definitely. So let's talk real quick about what's the team's presence at upcoming conferences. Talked about NG Atlanta. Team's going to be there, right? We got Angular Mix coming up. Can you shed light on where the team's going to be?
Like those are the main ones, plus Angular Connect out in London. So yeah, October we'll be at Angular Mix talking about all the things that we did in version 5. Then we'll go out to London, and then early next year we'll be out at NG Atlanta.
Very nice. So and again, like you said, very approachable, right? Ready to talk, ready to communicate, that sort of thing.
I hope so. Let me know if we're not.
Cool. What are you going to be wearing your "You Can Sit With Us" shirt, or do you have a new shirt planned?
That's still my go-to shirt. It just kind of reminds me why I'm there, and I hope it kind of like reinforces that, like, this is our community, and it's hard, right? Like, hey, look, we're computer folks, and a lot of us came from hey, I am kind of more comfortable as an introvert. How do I maybe reach out past my comfort zone to make other people feel welcome? Because I think it's easy to misinterpret. If I don't feel very social, misinterpret that as I'm not friendly. Probably not true. Like, most people, like, once I get talking to them, I realize, like, no, everybody's like kind of wants the same things out of life. And so how do we help everyone feel comfortable, like when they come to the conferences, when they're on the electronic forums, Twitter and GitHub and whatnot?
Which is hard at times, right, to accomplish that, but it's a very valiant effort and approach.
Yeah, like just keeping empathy in mind, and what is this other person going to experience based on how I'm communicating with them, or the ways I'm not communicating with them.
Yep, absolutely. Caring. All right, well, let's wrap this thing up. We're at the top of the hour, so why don't we do some picks? Who's got picks? Austin, you got some picks?
I do have some picks today. So I've got three. TypeScript 2.5 went into release candidate. So a lot of new changes there. Really exciting release. There is a new tool called the Webpack Electron Dashboard. It is a beautiful dashboard for your Webpack config that you can actually see instead of like the command line little dealy. You can actually see, you know, pretty graphs and stuff like that. Stuff that us UI designers or UI developers are used to and like. And then this week, my wife's in tech too, and I actually found these awesome JavaScript or compiled JavaScript leggings. So there's like JavaScript all down them. They're so cool looking. And there'll be a link out there for other people. They've got, you know, shirts for men, skirts and leggings and all kinds of stuff. So I thought it was cool and wanted to share with everyone.
Nice. Nice. Mike?
I've got one pick. I got turned on to a tool, diff tool called Kaleidoscope. I had just been using pretty much git diff on the command line and the tools that VS Code has. But Kaleidoscope kind of gives you the ability to not just compare individual files, but also directories. And I'm pretty happy with the UI and the speed and performance of it. So I'm going to throw out Kaleidoscope as my pick for the week.
Nice. Nice. Brad, do you have anything that you want to pick?
Well, I think I mentioned it already, but it's kind of early, but stackblitz.com as an online editor and a way to, you know, share code in the internet. It's a pretty magical experience. Go check it out.
Nice. All right. Well, that's it for today's episode. Thanks a ton, Brad, for coming on. We really appreciate it and taking us down this journey.
Thanks for having me. It's awesome.
Yes, yes. And you're welcome back anytime. And, you know, if you get that mustache going for Movember, you got to tweet that out or let us know.
Maybe we'll all come back on November with sporting the facial hair.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Brad. And big thanks to the team. Tell the team thanks for all the work that they do. We really appreciate it. And especially the fact that we get all this stuff for free from the team. So really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, folks. Bye.
All right. Have a good one. See you next week. Later.